Welcome to episode 7 of the Roots2Suits podcast. My name is Jameson Welbourn. As always, I'm joined by my co-host and brother, Graydon Welbourn. We are here today with Kevin Muise, the COO of 800 Pound Mantra, also affiliated with the Legends of Hashish Dinner and a number of other incredibly cool podcasts or cool projects, Kevin, thank you so much for joining us.
Dude, thank you guys so much for having me on, man.
Hey, Kevin, how you doing?
Really stoked to get in on a more long form situation like this and get to talk to people about what we're doing.
Absolutely, awesome. Man. You were doing so many cool things with Addison at 800 Pound Mantra. But before we get into that, what we like to do at the start of every show is take it back and learn a little more about you. So where are you from? Where did you grow up?
So I was born in Philadelphia in '84. And I spent a lot of my childhood kind of roaming around with my mom. Ended up in Massachusetts for a little while, and then in the late '80s, and then spent the majority of the '90s in Philadelphia, where I went to elementary school and all that. Grew up there, went back to Massachusetts to live with my mom and my stepfather. That's where I went to high school and really kind of cut my teeth in the work world.
So growing up before we get out of high school, were you a class clown? Were you quiet guy in the back? What were you like?
I was always a class clown. I was the dude that sold everybody weed, and in my senior year, I was infamously known for being, in an extravagant fashion, arrested for cannabis. The start of my senior year, brought me out in handcuffs out the front door so everyone could see, like during class shift, like all this crazy stuff to make a scene of it. And to be honest with you, that actually made it very difficult for me to graduate high school because it was my senior year. I wound up getting kicked out for quite some time. I was actually, it's kind of funny. I always loved weed, and I have Tourette syndrome actually. So a lot of people don't know that, but I have it really under wraps because of my cannabis use. I truly do believe that. So,
So take it back for me a little bit, Kev. Before the Perp Walk, grade 12 year, who introduced you to cannabis?
So, it's kind of interesting, right? Because I kind of believe that, and I can't confirm this, but I kind of believe that I had smoked cannabis when I was like 9 years old with a friend. We thought we were smoking his sister's cigarette, but we got goofy with cereal and watched Real Monsters on like Nickelodeon for real. But really, it was like in the woods behind my buddy's house when I was like 12 or 13. I think we made a makeshift like water pipe out of like a Sprite bottle or something. And then somebody had given me a metal bowl with a screen and like a pack of screens. And then I was like, oh, I'm styling now, and that was really like how I got in. But, what's kind of interesting is that my senior year, I was like, right after came back to school after like the 2 months or whatever, I was 18 and nobody else was really 18 yet. I was like, very early. So I would go to New Hampshire to a place called Smoke Rings and buy glass for all the kids younger than me who wanted pipes. So I'd be like, all right, well, they got this, and this up there. And I was buying Jason Lee pipes for like $150, $200 for kids, which was huge money back then. I'd make my 10% or whatever. And I would do that. And I was slinging glass at an early age, and that was right around Pipe Dreams. That was 2002, 2003. Yeah.
So at 12 years old, that first time in the woods, was it like an immediate connection and you were like, oh, I'm gonna use this? Did you immediately dive?
No, it really wasn't. It really wasn't. I'll be honest with you. It was probably like in the first handful of times, I just remember like, I kind of grew up in this, interesting town. It was very working class, but then also very like high end, like in certain areas, right? So it's like one of those dichotomy kind of towns. And I had a buddy who had this like mansion, right, and with like a trampoline. And I just remember like a couple of us, like my buddy Don, who actually has a show called My Friend Show, which, not to shamelessly plug my friend, but I did his podcast recently as well. So where we go into depth about all of this stuff, but really like, I just remember we had this like really bonding moment between the three of us, my buddy Zach, Don, and myself. And we were just being goofy. And I like tapped into this goofy side that's always been there, because I was always the class clown. I was always like raising hell. But yeah, I mean, it's that's I think where my connection kind of came to it, because I was like, oh, this is a connector, right? Because like I'd smoked weed a few times, Don smoked weed a few times, we'd smoked weed together. Our buddy Zach had never smoked weed before. And so I saw it, like I saw that connection be had by somebody that I think was a little bit more reserved in his temperament prior to cannabis. And I just felt like that opened up our relationship. And it was like through those relationships and that I realized that people, like, I realized that my parents smoked weed. I realized that everyone was like, oh, this is great. This is way better than alcohol. Which I did drink in excess for a while there, but later on in life when I gave up alcohol, hash was the reason why. But yeah, man, I wouldn't say it was like an instant, immediate connection, like some like. But I do believe that like over time, those early relationships really informed like my understanding of how people interact with cannabis. And I think a lot of it actually was informed by my parents and the weed that I would steal from them.
I think it's an interesting answer. We asked this, Kevin, to all our guests, and everyone has a different answer, but I don't think anyone's ever said, cannabis, I really got into cannabis because of how it affected my relationships with other people in a positive way, is what I think you're saying, right?
Yeah, I mean, it was that, but also, listen, I'm fascinated by human nature, right? And I think that cannabis was one of those first sort of things where I sort of observed how different people of different backgrounds and different things had interacted with it. And it's one of those fascinations that has led me to, 25 plus years later, right? Where like, this is literally what I do, is try to understand cannabis buying trends and how people interact with the culture. And I think that now that I'm really thinking about it, it really just stems from that early fascination. It's kind of like music too, because like, I always drew parallels between the two, and I always thought that I would have a life in music. I always thought that my careers would be in music, right? But I see that music is the same way. Everybody across all social, economic, any barriers or fake barriers that we think we have, like people interact with music, and music is cultural. And I think cannabis is the same way. You look at just how people have interacted with it ancestrally in different in different communities throughout society. It all just fascinates me. But like I said, it's one of those things that's like a universal language almost. Mm-hmm. Quite like music is, cannabis is too, because everybody fucking smokes weed, man, all over the goddamn world.
So Kevin, you said something there. You said you thought that your career was going to be in music. Can you talk a little bit more about that and what role music played for you? Was it later in life that you discovered?
Music was immediate. It was immediate. I mean, as far back as I can remember. I mean, probably comic books first, but realistically, music hit me the hardest. I grew up the MTV generation. My uncle is just only like 12 years older than me. He graduated in 91, so I was, still pretty young. I was, 7, 8 years old, but I was watching all that MTV with him. Like music was huge, Guns N' Roses, Metallica, but then like all the hip hop and like all that, just I loved it. And then, you know, I always loved Pantera and Dimebag Darrell. It was because of Dimebag Darrell that I went and got a guitar when I was like 13 or something and started playing, and I still play to this day. And you know, it's interesting because I'm also a collector, so I have a bunch of guitars, I have guitar pedals, I geek out on the things that I'm really interested in. Music was really the early thing, guitar stuff, beat making machines, like all that stuff. Like I loved collecting it. I loved collecting CDs. I worked at a music store all through high school as one of my like second jobs, you know, fixing guitars and selling CDs and burning CDs and like all this stuff and just being immersed in music. I really did think that my life path would have been that I was going to be a musician. And so it's like, it's weird, right? Like, I feel like there's a lot of people in cannabis that sort of share that same path, but I think it's these things that are very similar, right? Like they're kind of fringe, kind of creative, community driven. It's all the same. It's same like with comedians and musicians. Musicians often think they're comedians and thought they would have been comedians, and comedians often think that they're musicians or would have been musicians going up. Bill Hicks is a perfect example of that. I think that, I mean, I'm a firm believer that like all things are kind of like interconnected, and in these sort of creative, community-driven fields, if you will, or verticals, or whatever you want to call it, like they all are fundamentally the same. They tap into something primitive: cannabis, music, comedy, right? Like they all hit like something ancestral in us, and they're all community based. And I think that I'm just drawn to those types of things. And I think that I knew it early on, but I'm just at an age now where I can actually articulate it in this way. It's taken me a lifetime to figure out like why this is all the same. But I really do believe like all these things overlap because they're all fundamentally, you know, driving at the same things, just from different angles.
I think it's such a cool point how it's all like almost ancestral and just like innately in everyone. Like you said, everyone smokes weed and everyone loves music. Who doesn't like both of those things?
I mean, we have a fucking endocannabinoid system. Yeah. We have a hearing system. Like these things are like actually we're built for it, you know? And it's like so weird that I'm just drawn to those things. You know, but like I said, I really did think that music was going to be where it was. But then also when I was younger, you were a maverick if you smoked weed. It was just like, it was almost like, oh, you're going to grow out of that. You know, like people didn't believe me when I was just like, you know, I actually think there's like business here, because I was like making money and and they were all just spending money on it. And I was making money off of it. And I was like, oh, there's something here that's more long term. And then when I got that opportunity to go to Raw Rolling Papers, I went for it full bore because I understood that it was a culture play, and almost everything we do now is really, it's culture, community first. And I think that, you know, again, it all stems back to those early realizations of, you know, music and cannabis and how they kind of like overlap.
So did that charge end up sticking from that perp walk in grade 12?
No, I think it was just shy of like 2 weeks or 3 weeks before my 18th birthday. So it didn't stick. But I was unable to go to school for a while, and then they were supposed to provide me a tutor that they never provided me, which then when I went back to school, I was, you know, I was too far behind. And then they told me if I just like really work hard, like you'll make it. And then, I mean, it wasn't the charge. Like I didn't end up with a charge. It's the repercussions of how it like actually affected my life. I would like, you know what I mean? Like I actually worked hard that second half of the year thinking that if I just worked hard and I showed effort, I'm going to graduate. And then it was kind of embarrassing. I went with this girl that I really liked. We went to go sign up for the prom, and they were like, "Oh, you're not graduating." Cursed out some of the teachers I didn't like and got the fuck out. And I got into the trades. I was actually, for a while, I was doing HVAC. I was like doing tin knocking, which, you know, it's interesting. That could have been my foray into cannabis if I had stayed down that path. But all the while, I was always trapping weed, you know? I mean, even then, like even before weed, I was trapping chromies, like, those were like the little chrome tips on the tires from like big trucks, and I'd go steal them, and kids would buy them off me like $5 for a pair, $10 for both, or for both pairs, and then like put them on their bikes. That was my like very first hustle.
I've never heard of that. I did not know that was a thing.
It was like a big thing in like the 90s, like early 90s in like the East Coast, I guess.
Where would you put them on your bike? You'd put them on like
so they're like on the tubes, right? Like so like on the inner tube, right? You can take them off, and then it's the same tube size. It's the same, you know, pump size. So then you just replace your shitty plastic one with like this chrome one, and we called them chromies. And I mean, I would sling those fucking things and buy like Super Nintendo video games and CDs and shit.
Yeah, I think that there's an interesting correlation between, and this can't be put to everybody, but a lot of the individuals that have seen success both in legacy and legal cannabis tend to have a bit of a make it happen captain gene in their body. That
absolutely,
you know, you drop them in the jungle naked, they're coming out fully clothed with a couple of pets, you know.
Fuck so, yeah, dude. And a knife in their teeth.
Yeah, exactly. So
yeah, I mean, and that's exactly right, man. And I think that, you know, it's the same thing, right? It's like what gets you there. What gets you there was like what'll keep you going. Like, you know, making those connections, finding what people like really want in this world, and then sourcing it and giving it to them. You know, I mean, at its most basic. You know.
So you went into the trades immediately after the issues that you had in your senior year. How, I know you transitioned into the culinary arts. How quickly did that happen?
Yeah, so all through high school, like I had worked at this place called the Clam Box, which is a really funny name, but it's actually like this like world famous like clam shack in Ipswich, Massachusetts, and that's where I grew up. And I worked there and the music store actually, like all through high school. I did all sorts of stuff. Like I worked fine dining. I had worked corporate, like the last actual job that I had, I worked a corporate job. And so I was like 10 years in. So this was like my like mid to late 20s or something. I was like 25 or 26 or something. And I worked this like really great job. I worked with the Cheesecake Factory for a couple of years actually, which is where I learned a lot of like corporate stuff and like actually like paid attention and learned how to like train masses of people. I went through a training program, and then I've taken that in every job I've had since. Like learning, just literally having those skills on how to train people was like worth the 2 years that I had in a corporate job. Right. I left there, went and did like some fine dining, and then after that, I had,
were you always cooking, Kevin, or what were you doing for
always,
these?
Always my whole life. My grandmother always cooked. My great grandmother was always cooking every Sunday. You know, Irish family, but would cook the shit out of some Italian food every Sunday for some reason.
Amazing.
And I learned there, and then it was just I got offered this job, and when I started in restaurants, it wasn't cooking. I was my position was called an onion boy. That position still exists, and I believe is still called onion boy to this day. And it's just I would cut onions for onion rings. I would make coleslaw. So I would do all like the prep work. I'd make sure that the cooks had everything like stocked up, all their clams, all their this, all their everything all stocked up, and I took care of the trashes. That's how I started, moved my way to fry cook, and then left there and wound up getting like a real kitchen job at this place called Tom Shays. And literally in like 2 years, I became the sous chef. So literally I learned, that's where I learned that I understood operations, that I understood like how to run people, like how do we rotate, like how do we rotate 4 people, and that there's always 3 people on or 2 people on these days, 3 people on these days. That how do you rotate that and make sure that I learned all that on the fly because nobody else wanted to do it, and I kind of took that over, and that's kind of like where I learned a lot of those skills, those operational skills early on, and then that was fine dining too. So I really cut my teeth there at Tom Shays in Essex, Mass, and that place is also still there, and they're fantastic. So.
That's awesome. So after that, you actually got into the WOOF or the Woofer program that I'm actually aware of. Can you tell the people, first, what is the WOOF program, and why you chose to do that? What was there a moment that you just kind of decided to make that change?
Well, it's very interesting, right? Like it's interesting sometimes, like especially in your early life. You think your path is one path, and then it turns into a different path. And some people try to resist it, and some people just go with it, right? So I had this path where I thought I was going to move to California with some friends. Those friends had a falling out. Things wound up happening. I had moved out of my apartment already and was like staying with my sisters. It was just a really good friend of mine, Alicia, and I was in this weird space because I'm in this limbo. I couldn't go to California yet because things kind of fell through with my friends that I was kind of really banking on. And then I had already moved out of my place, so I couldn't just like keep my apartment, and like my roommate had already moved out, and like all this stuff. So I was in this like true limbo, and somebody had told me about this WOOF thing, and it's called Worldwide Opportunities in Organic Farming. And I was just like very interested in that. So I got into this program, this WOOF program, within about a month. And I went out to Petaluma, California, which is just north of San Francisco. And I worked on a farm there, on an organic farm, livestock, planting. And actually back then, there was really barely a shell of a website. I actually had to get a big book that they sent me where I went in, and all the farms that were participating all over the world, like I could have picked olives in Italy, or I could have done this, or I could have done that. Wow. I chose, because I had my heart set on going to Northern California, I chose to stay in Northern California. I found this awesome farm in Petaluma, Terra Firma Farms, and I got to work with Joel Salatan, which was very interesting, and learn all about biodiversity and organic.
Was that decision cannabis motivated, Kevin? Like, was cannabis still present?
Yeah, why California?
So it was actually all food motivated, because my thought was that I'm going to take a break. I'm burnt out from cooking. I've done 10 years of cooking straight. I'm burnt out. I want to leave Boston. I want to go to Northern California. That was the motivation. So then I'm like, okay, well, if I'm going to do this WOOF program, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to learn everything about food, from the seed to the dirt to, the animals being born and raising them. I want to learn everything about food.
You were geeking out on the food process.
Into food, cool. I'm gonna do it, right? Because I even like auditioned for the second season of Top Chef. Like,
no way.
Very serious about cooking. I was very.
That's so cool. I love that show so much. I watch every season.
And it's actually funny. Like I've gotten to meet the guy who won that season that I auditioned for, and his name's Marcel Vigneron, and I've met him out here in LA a few times. Super cool guy, loves weed and hash, and it's like it's so perfect, man. But yeah, I was really motivated on being the best chef that I could be. I really wanted to I wanted to do the dream, right? Like eventually open some bougie ass restaurant where I can tell the story that I worked on the farm and did this and learned that and learned all this. And it was interesting because when I was there on the farm, I had
Wait, Kevin, I have a question. Quick question. So, is Wolf setting you up with a job, or is this volunteer work?
You basically get to cut your own deal with the farm. They provided a directory, let's say, for different farms all over the world. I could contact those farms and see what positions they have, what openings they have. With my farm, I think it was I got like 50 or $100 a week. I had a all my food and everything paid for, everything like that. We ate all organic off the farm anyway. And I had like the housing, I had everything sort of taken care of and like a little stipend basically. But for me, it was more about the experience than it was about making a job, because I knew it was a temporary 4 or 5 month gig. It wasn't like to be an actual position.
And so what came next? Like was it, how long did you spend up in North?
So the interesting thing was at that point, I was at the farm for a few months, and the owner of the farm's son, same with Spencer, and he was working on the farm with us, and he and I were we just be talking while we're slaughtering chickens, right? And he just literally was just like, dude, you know how to talk. You've got the gift of gab. Have you ever done sales? I was like, well, I mean, I used to sell weed, but I've never done a sales job. So he's like, well, over the summer, he's like, last summer I made I don't know, it was 20 or 30 grand selling alarm systems door to door in Arizona. And he's like, you should come to Arizona. We'll train you how to do it, and we'll go knock door to door and you'll make a boatload of money. I'm like, you know what? I actually have nothing going on after this, so why not? And that's exactly what I did. I went down to Arizona. I stayed with some dudes that I had never met before. They gave me a mattress on a floor, and they taught me how to do sales door to door. And they really truly taught me how to do sales. I mean, and it's the most savage sales you can do, because it's also in Arizona where everybody's got a gun, and people don't like their doors being knocked on because the Mormons knock there heavily. So it's a very interesting place to learn sales. But what happened was I was gearing up to do a sales job that was going to end me back up in Northern California, because I was all about living in Oakland with my friends. And I was like, but I'll have this job and it'll be cool. And I was given the opportunity to actually be the first person hired for their new company, which was called Green Monster, which, being from Boston, Green Monster, Red Sox, I was like, okay, what's up with this? And it was renewable energy, which was more in line with what I'm about, which was, what part of the reason why I was on the farm. I wanted to learn about nature and, the earth and all that. So it really felt in line with what I was doing. I became the first employee of that. And I took everything that I learned in sales, I applied it to selling solar door to door. And then within a couple of months, I was running our sales team. And then they were giving me an expansion office in California, and of Riverside, I believe. I didn't like Riverside, and I wound up leaving that. But it was at that point that I actually got into real cannabis, outside of just trapping or, doing what I was doing all those years before.
And what was that? Was that your first role with Raw?
Yeah. So I was in an interesting position where I had already found my replacement for the office that I was running, and the company was dragging their feet on the expansion, and I had already moved out of my condo. I'm sleeping on a buddy's couch. I'm literally just stuck in this purgatory limbo, still getting paid, but I can't even generate sales to make money. So I'm really in this weird position. And I was just on Facebook and saw that Raw Rolling Papers was looking for, I originally think they said a sales rep, not even a marketing rep. And I was in Tucson. They were up in Phoenix, about an hour and a half up north. I just went up and I interviewed. I met Josh, Josh Kesselman, HBI, like Raw HBI owner. Met him, didn't know who he was because he wasn't a character like in the pantheon of cannabis at the time. Like Raw was still pretty like, it was a pretty small brand. Only connoisseurs.
What year was this, Kevin?
This was I believe late 2010. And so I had met Josh in my first interview. I guess it was down to like me and some guy who was like a sword swallower or something. But I just told him, I was like, listen, like they're asking me about like my marketing background. I was like, well, I used to do music. We used to throw shows. I had high school bands, like we'd throw shows. I'd promote those. I did street team work for, DJ Shadow and Mastodon and System of a Down, like all these cool, like upcoming bands really. And I used to do all that. And so I was like, it's kind of the same thing. And, and they wound up hiring me that day. Like they called me like half hour later after I left and gave me a card, a credit card, and a box and a trunk full of Raw Rolling Papers. And was like, we're going to set you up with some events. We're going to set you out there into the world. And we need you to hit X amount of smoke shops a day. I mean, I was on tour with Currency for 56 days. And
that's so cool.
40 of those days, I would say, I was going to smoke shops and doing all the tour stuff.
Wow.
And running events in different cities that like I would.
Was Raw sponsoring his tour?
Yeah, so we sponsored the Jet Life tour in 2011, spring 2011. And I had done some like a couple of like High Times events. I went to like South by Southwest. I went to Champs Trade Show, and that was all just like within like the first like 2 months, I think 3 months that I was working with Raw. Yeah, I was really like learning, understanding those buyer trends, understanding like what's pushing somebody or what demographic or really is buying a connoisseur artisanal pack of Raw versus or an organic or versus this.
How did you think to do that, Kevin? Like what sparked that where you're like, let me figure out who our customers are? Oh, okay.
I was told to do that. I mean, I would be on the phone with Josh pretty regularly. Josh taught me more about marketing than anybody. And a lot of it was not by like explaining it to me. Maybe he just knew that I'm not like an explain it to me kind of guy. Like I didn't do well in high school, right? I don't learn from books. I learn from doing, right? Like that's it. And so I think he knew how to like motivate me or push me and be like, okay, you have to do this. Like do this and this. And then along the way, I figured out why I had to do that. And that's like what taught me a lot of just, the culture. The interesting thing was that the whole time I could never actually say cannabis. I could never show cannabis. Like I got all this footage backstage of these concerts with the biggest rappers in the world. Like I got videos of like Currency and Nipsey Hussle and Alchemist all chilling backstage smoking weed that I could never put out because it had weed on it. It was crazy.
That's crazy. That's so cool also.
So I had to learn how to like market in a new way because I was on I started the Twitter, couldn't figure out how to make Twitter for a brand, especially back in 2010, 11. It was like, it was really not, it was more of a personal thing. And then Instagram had just started. And to be honest with you, it was Babu, DJ Babu from Dilated Peoples, who was like, you need to go. It was actually him. It was him and Raka from Dilated. They were like, you gotta do an Instagram for the brand because this is where it's going. And these guys were like I watched them spend like an hour like editing photos with like what we now know is like horrible filters from like 2012, right? But like
Crazy.
we could all see those photos and we know they're all blown out and we're like, oh, that's from like 2013. It's one of those, right? But like I learned like, oh, the attention's going over there, like it's going to be visual. So I went heavy on Instagram, like especially like on those tours and whatnot. And I mean, it paid off. And like we could do it. And ever since then, like you could do it without really showing cannabis. And I think it seems like a little bit more lax now, but even still, like when you see with Josh's videos, like he never actually like says like material, you know, things of that nature, because it's still for you know, on that end, it's still tough, you know. It's Arizona still, you know.
So you were a sales rep, and then when did you transition to a different position in the company?
No, so I actually never did sales. I think I was originally applying for like a sales or marketing position. I can't really remember, to be honest with you. It was like a Facebook post when they had like a couple hundred followers on Facebook. But it was very clear to me that they needed somebody that was out there, that was pushing the brand forward, that was maybe the face of the brand, in certain regards, like the mouthpiece for the brand. So essentially that's what I was, you know, to be, and that's exactly what I went out and did.
So at what point did you connect with Addison?
Actually, kind of a funny story. We were at the High Times Cannabis Cup in Denver, and I was there. We sponsored the event, so I always just would like have like raw papers in the bags. I never did booths with raw back then. Never did booths. I always like had a backpack and like got in and stoked people out, right? So we would do that. So I would travel around, and I saw that there was a panel discussion for like cannabis testing, and I was like, oh, that's pretty interesting. So I had a lull, and I just popped in and watched this thing, and it's like three of these like stuffy, like suited up assholes talking out of their ass, and then Addison just comes in, and I'm paraphrasing, but he's like, I'm from Boston, you guys fucking suck, here's the truth. And I was just like, I like this guy, right? And I was like, oh, Steve Hill, they're in Oakland, and I was in Oakland at the time, so I'm like, I ran into him like afterwards, just like walking around. I was like, yo, man, I saw you. Yeah, I'm like, yeah, man, I'm from Boston too. He likes to make fun of me and say that I'm not from Boston because I was born in Philadelphia. But I said, I'm from Boston too. And I'm like, you're in Oakland? Yeah. He's like, you should come by. I love raw papers. And this was before like we were like big on the hash and the dabbing, right? And he was like, I love raw papers. It's what I use. So I was like, oh, you know, let's meet up next week. So like literally like a few days after we both got back from the event, I went to his office at the old Steep Hill Labs in Oakland, and I just went in. And I dropped him with cases of papers and was just like, hey, like you've got all the growers, you got all these people coming in. Can I just leave papers here? And he's like, yeah, you can leave papers here. So my papers went out to everybody through them because it was this like cultural center, even though it was based around like the science, right? I mean, I would hang out there. I met like some of the best breeders. I met some of the coolest dudes. I met some of these like long-standing relationships and good friends are people that I all met at like Steep Hill Lab back then. So yeah, it was really great for me. It was great exposure for our brand to have that at Steep Hill. And Addison and I just quickly became friends because we speak the same language. We're from the same area. We've lived a very similar like life path. We communicate together very well. I think it was like very inherent. We just became very good friends at that point. You know.
And so at what point did you make the decision to part ways with Raw and join forces with Addison?
So I mean, there was a long stretch between the two, but the Raw thing was amazing. It was the greatest. I mean, literally to this day, it was one of the best jobs I've ever had. I mean, I had so much fun, so much growth. I mean, when I look back on it, it was a time of growth. But I was kind of burnt out from being on the road so much, so I took kind of a step back. I still did stuff with them until I kind of just fully transitioned out. And in that time, I mean, I had a pretty tough time, in life, just personal things that kind of happened that kind of felt like it may have set me back a little bit. I went back to Massachusetts and then kind of rebuilt. And I mean, I trapped super hard and got and I've always been in the glass game. So I was, even flipping pieces for many years. I had access to glass blowers that people didn't have, even if it was just a small local glass blower, or if it was a, really big piece from, somebody really big, I'd be able to facilitate those sales. So I did that for a number of years. I always stayed in the culture of it, let's say we did, traditional work. I stayed in it, on the traditional side, and still stayed, rubbing elbows with everybody. But I was kind of on my own path for a few years. And then Addison was working for Advanced Nutrients, and they were building out a cannabis program, and I came out to work on that project with them to run sales. But we wound up, let's just say we left that project. We weren't a part of that project. And at that point we realized, when the entire team left, and we sort of realized that the real juice is here. This is where it all really resides. So why don't we just try and strike it out on our own? And that's what we did about 2.5 years ago with 800 Pounds Mantra.
And so what was the first client of 800 Pound Mantra? What was the first project that you guys took on?
Well, we'd had all these different ideas, right? When we started, originally Addison was advising me. He was like, hey, why don't you just start a sales group? You and a couple buddies, sell products for brands to dispensaries. And I was like, that sounds really great, but I'd rather put a gun in my mouth because I don't want to do sales to dispensaries. But it made sense, right? The sales group model made a lot of sense. That's, fast forward now, it's a couple of years later. I mean, we're really doing a similar sort of, model, because it does make a lot of sense, right? The early stages of Pyramid Pipeline came from those days, but our first actual paying client, I think we had one that had a product that never came on, never jumped off. We got paid for a couple of months and it didn't work out. I think it was some brand with a J that didn't, it wound up not being a brand, right? But our first cannabis industry client that paid us was Brandon from Third Gen. So he was our first real client. We worked with him on his Ego Clash event, and just back office stuff. It's hey, we understand business. I think in those early days, we kind of took the approach of let the artist be the artist, and every artist needs the back end guy, right? And so let's fill that role. But we were still growing as a company, right? We didn't really know our full path yet, and those sorts of things kind of present themselves over time. And I think, for us, it was just keeping our eyes open, constantly interacting with everybody, whether it be a breeder or a hash maker or a grower or a nursery, or it doesn't matter, right? The retailers, it doesn't matter. We were just sitting there and people were telling us their problems, and we're okay, in those problems, we sell solutions. Like it's literally in our company crest right there. It says solutions optimized. That's our whole like North Star of our business is there's problems. Great. We love problems. Let's solve them. And let's find a way so that everybody can benefit from us solving that problem.
That makes a lot of sense. So you guys have a number of projects on the go right now. Can you talk a little bit about Pyramid Pipeline and what you've designed?
Absolutely. So, Pyramid Pipeline is really our baby. That's the way I view it. It's our baby, right? It's the solution. It really is, right? So, hash makers would come to us and be like, hey, can you locate us some fresh frozen, some starting, and for people that don't know, fresh frozen is just bulk starting material that's of a good enough quality at the right sort of specifications that can produce good solventless hash. We found that there was a lot of strains out there, that were viable, but there was only lists of like 5, 10, 15, maybe 20 strains. 5 of them will be a cake. 3 of them will be a modified like GMO cross, right? It was just like kind of stagnant. And then it was very incestuous in how like these lists were going around to all the hash makers, and they were finding their problems were like, okay, well, then I'd go to try to buy some ice cream cake and I can only get half my order, or there's nothing there because somebody else already bought it and this, that. And it's like, well, there's got to be a better way. And we saw that there were some brands that were maybe trying to approach it from a transport first perspective, which
what do you mean by that?
What I mean by that is you could take different perspectives, right? And so like if you're you have a transport business and you're looking, is it that, are you a transport business that's trying to find business for your business? Like we're about making hash better. That's and that's just the goal always, is to make hash better and to use the supply chain and to amend and make the supply chain work in a way that benefits everybody, that is also for hash as its goal. So we come from more of I would say like a cultural, like deep cultural understanding with operational. Like, so we're not transport guys, but we're operations guys, So I think like we sort of, my view is that we take it from more of that perspective, which I think between Addison and my collective and everybody within our team, our collective years of experience here, like we understand the trends, we understand we understand what drives these sales, and it's really about those SKUs, which is strains.
Well, I mean, I'm up here in Canada kind of preaching on my soapbox to nobody, but I've always said that, you show me an incredibly passionate management team that runs a craft beer company, you're going to see incredible craft beer. And I think that having people involved in optimizing solventless distribution logistics that use solventless products all day as part of their daily regimen is probably the guys that I would want, working on that project. So I think what you guys are doing is well needed. And I think that when you get to ultra high level producers, sometimes there's so much artists that they're missing a large portion of that business contingent. And those people have been burnt so many times by making those partnerships or trying to work with the wrong people and having those people try and take advantage of them, that they're very gun shy to work with anybody today, and would rather sort of forego opportunity and profit just to know that they're safe behind their walls. And it takes a special kind of person who I think, can rip a few dabs and then, look somebody in the eye and explain to them what they want to do and how they're going to do it and how everything's going to make sense. I think that's, goes a long way in this business. And so I really applaud you guys for
Thank you.
doing what you're doing.
I appreciate that. And listen, I'd like to say something on that too. Is like, we really are, like I said, we're just here to make hash better. Like that's the only perspective is to push forward hash, to provide tools, right? Because what's happening, I think, is that people are wary of these companies that are trying to hoard everything and be like, this is our fucking shit. And we're so anti that. We're a platform. We're saying this is a platform for you to popularize your genetics, to get genetics. Hey, if you got 6 plants at home, like you can go get these banging genetics and grow it at home. Like we're not trying to like put roadblocks in and keep all the business like within ourselves. Like that's not what we're doing. We're open source. We're bringing in the correct partnerships so that all of the partners are focusing on their avenue. We could have done this in a way where we're trying to do everything. This is a much better way because this is a supply chain. This is many entities, and we're treating it as such, and we're treating it as a platform as well. And I think that part of the reason why this is so enticing is because this is an open source platform. This is any breeder can come in and say, hey, like we've got these really great genetics. It could be somebody who's an unknown breeder who has something that's really washing well. We could test it out in the pipeline. Like, like that's it stuff.
Absolutely. I mean, there's a ton of other cool projects you guys are working on. I don't know which ones you're able to talk about, but one thing that I want to touch on is your connection to BC Bubble Man, Marcus, and the Legends of Hashish dinner. So,
I mean, Addison really holds that early relationship, and I'm sure he's talked about it before. And I don't know all of the particulars, but I know that he was like a rep for Bubble Bags like back in the day, and they've known each other a very long time. Addison one day just was like, dude, what if we did Legends of Hash in the US? And I was just like, that makes all the sense in the world, because that puts us, if we're culture and community first, this puts us square dead center of that culture and community, for that is just there to benefit, that are there. Those people are there to benefit from the tools that we're building, right? So this can be like our cultural component. That makes a lot of sense. Through this process, I've gotten to know Marcus very well, and he's like very wise, like in our world, and I'm so just grateful to him and his partnership through this, so that and really like he has supported us 100% of the way on everything we wanted to do with Legends. It's actually like a dream partnership. And Legends of Hash, or Legends of Hashish, for people who don't know what that is, it's a true legacy hashish celebration that started on the back of the original High Times Cannabis Cups in Amsterdam. It would be during the same time when everybody was in town, and it was very hush hush. Like you got invited to it, and you got to eat a meal and share your hash. Like you put a jar down and everybody shares, and we're going to celebrate. And it started there, and then it grew into something grassroots, very grassroots, super cultural, like unbelievably cultural, totally like if you know, it's the epitome of if you know, and if you're in the hash culture and you're really in hash culture, what Legends of Hashish is. There had never been one in the United States. And I mean, I'll be honest, Addison was bold enough to say, what if we did that? And I was like, yeah, but sure. But then it became a reality, and it was, one of the best events, I've ever been a part of in terms of like throwing and putting together. Even if we just left it at the one, I feel like immense pride with that, but very, very excited for the future of
so For the people listening that don't know what Legends is, take us through the format of the event that you put on this last year in LA.
So we make it very small, right? We have 24, 25 hash makers that we invite, and they have an offering of their hash that they want to share with the dinner and the community. It's an offering. And so it's always been a Lebanese meal. So we get it catered by this great Lebanese spot that Fidel actually took Addison and I to this spot like last year. And it was incredible. It's called Carousel. And you know, Fidel is from Lebanon. So, you know, I mean, that's some credibility right there. So we were like, all right, we got to get them to cater it. So there's an open hash bar where you can get, if you're a guest, you can get like 25.25 gram. And if you're like a maker, you can get like 0.5 gram samples. And you can just go up and get, you know, a bunch of different samples at a time. And you get like, it's not a judge's kit, but like, you know, for the nomenclature, like as we know, it's like a box of hash that you're given when you come in. So you could like get in and you know, choose 4 or 5 at a time, kind of stock up and take it home with you, like legitimately. Have a meal and smoke. We had Mothership Glass. They came and did a drop in our event, which is they don't really do that. You know, Mothership doesn't really do that. So it was an incredible honor. It's like, that's like one of the things like I'm most honored about is just the fact that they came through and did that with us. It was just so huge. And it's also built like a really great relationship with Mothership and Legends of Hash, and you know, think that's going to continue forward. But the event itself was, like I said, it's dinner, it's smoking, it's meeting your contemporaries, and it's all culture. Every single person in there, every guest was hand selected, whether it was, you know, Secret Sesh Tim, or, you know, he's culture, right? Or somebody like Lot Comedy, Jersey Mike, like he's that dude's like literally hash culture, you know, like we made sure that we brought the right people in, and not in an exclusionary way. That's not what we're trying to do here, but it is private. It is small. It has always been that way. It will always be that way. For a good reason. It needs to be special because it is.
100%, man. 100%. And I'm super stoked to support this year. You're actually throwing an event this year. What are you doing? What changed? What are you doing differently this year than last year?
You know, I'm just thinking about what I can say and what I can't. So, what I'm pretty sure is, that we're going to do a 2-day event this time, simply because there just wasn't enough time for the amount of hash that was there for people to really properly enjoy the hash and mingle and get to talk, right? So that was not a criticism, but that was just like, hey, like, I wish I had more time. It always was, I wish I had more time. So I think what we're going to do is a dinner and then a brunch the following day in the same venue. So we have more time. You can go home, more time with the hash. You can come back. The second day is a little bit more, maybe a little bit more leisurely, or maybe it's more serious for you, whichever it is. The venue is going to be larger this time around. It's at the same place, but just a different venue that's a larger size. Which will allow us to bring in more like vendors and have like a little bit more vendor interaction. And I think, you know, we're toying around with the idea of allowing people to have their phones this time. It had always been kind of like a phone free, like in its, you know, earliest of days, there was smugglers that would come, right? So they maybe weren't the hash makers, but they were the smugglers who were going through Europe, and they would come through with something from some region that was some absolute fire, right? Well, there's no cameras or anything allowed to have protected them and to protect. And it's always just been about like, we put the phone down. We're not on our phone. We're not on our cameras. We're not clout chasing. We're smoking fucking hash and we're eating some food, and we're going to break bread, and we're going to just be a community together for one night. But I think that may change moving forward, but that's not set in stone yet. There are certain reasons that would make the entire it would go that way if that by doing so makes the experience better for everybody. Like that, at the end of the day, that's what we want to do. We want to preserve the event as much as we can and its legacy, while providing people with the type of event they really want to be at. That is like the highest honor. We want it to be that, because I think it is that,
Absolutely.
I think Legends really is.
It's definitely the tippity top in my mind.
Yeah.
You have built a very active and are continuing to build a very active Discord community. Is that by design? What is the reason behind it?
So I mean, the first reason why I'd ever looked at Discord or any alternative to Instagram is simply because we are too vulnerable on Instagram, right? We're too vulnerable on Facebook. We're too vulnerable on all like Web 2 social media, really. While like Discord is Discord, you're not making a page, you're making a server. You own the server, right? You monitor the server. You're not being monitored. And you can't throttle engagement. It's actually more difficult to get engagement, I'm finding, on Discord than, in a traditional, Web 2 social media. But I think at the end of the day, like, you own that community, not in the sense of like you own the place in which the community is being run. So that way it's not like somebody else like Mark Zuckerberg owns it and it gets taken down because you talked about hash 7 years ago, right? I think, like, you look at guys like Beard Brothers, like, what do they post that's of any threat to society? Yet they're chopped at the knees. They had like 140,000 followers, and now that page is gone multiple times, by the way. That's not right. So what is it for them? Like, they have their email. You can't like take down an email list, but emails aren't social. So where do we have like conversations? And I looked at all these different things, and I think Discord or something, whatever the next iteration of Discord is a solution. Simply because, like I said, you own the conversation at that point. Addison always makes a good point. 800-pound mantra, like, let's say we have 5,000 people in our Discord, right? Which we don't. We just started our Discord, but let's say we have 5,000 in there, and our page of 3,500 people on Instagram or whatever gets taken down because I posted a really nice photo of a fucking plant 2 years ago, right? Let's say it's something like that. Well, we could just start a new Instagram, tell everybody, do a push on Discord, and repopulate a new Instagram overnight. Because
I think Mace did that.
We're out here.
I think Mace did like 5,000 people in like 24 or 48 hours.
Mace, I love Mace because when I'm talking about culture first, that dude has figured it out. He's figured it out, right? And it's like, not only does he get numbers, but he actually gets engagement on his numbers. His engagement is through the roof, from what I see, right? Like, he's very active. His community is very active. I'm in his Discord, and I love his community, right? And that's exactly right. Like, I think like you can You can have a little bit more resiliency if you have a Discord page. I'm just sick and tired of my posts getting taken down. I'm sick and tired of my friends having their businesses, chopped at the legs. I really am, because at the end of the day, like, you're too vulnerable if your business strategy is even, if your media strategy for your brand is even half in Instagram, you are way too over leveraged on Instagram. I think that and there really isn't a great alternative, right? People have tried to do like social media for cannabis. It doesn't work. People don't care. And social medias, they don't like a traditional Web2 social media can't work too narrow, like in like cannabis or automotive, right? Like you see like any of those like more narrow or singular social medias, they don't have enough engagement. They don't have enough user base to actually get network effects, right? I mean, how many times have the new social medias come around, you sign up, you put your account in, you get in there, there's 3 people talking at a wall. You walk out because there's not enough engagement. The network isn't there. So I think, solutions are, things like Discords. And I think the solution really is more Web3 tools that are coming.
Talk a little bit about that, because I know 800 Pounds Mantra is getting seriously involved in Web 3.0. From your standpoint, I'd love to open it up and hear what your thoughts are on Web 3.0.
Yeah, I mean, so it's just technology doing its thing, right? We have I always get the laws mixed up. Is it Metcalfe's law, when like technology doubles every 2 years and it's in its capacity and like it gets smaller or something, right? So I think that, in a Web 2 world and a traditional social media world, it's a little too blown out of proportion, right? I think that these social media platforms have they have a lot of users to a point where it's all become noise. I think that people are getting just a little, they're getting a little like just not fed up with social media.
Tired, over inundated.
What's that?
Yeah, over inundated by everything, just sick of the noise.
Well, and then also to the tune of, I follow 7,000 people, but like I never see like my friends and their posts because I'm following 300 clothing brands and 3,000 fucking celebrities and this, that, and the other, because you just keep clicking follow. And I think people are just getting whoa, right? So when you're in Discord, right, like most people only have 3 Discords, 5 Discords that they follow, and they're all communities that they're actively engaging with. I think that there's going to be a shift to that. But Web3 in its total is just, people think it's crypto or it's NFTs. It's just tooling to make the internet better. It's just it's the new iteration of the internet. Web 1 was you could have blogs and then you could go and click on something on that website. Web 2 then turned into social media. Now we can read and write. Now we can interact. Now we can build communities, right? But what we found was that all of these entities, all these social medias, they're centralized. They have the one person with the God, complex that can push the button on you at any time. And I think that that it's tough, man. It's tough in a Web 2 world where we're realizing that it's centralized and that we're we're vulnerable. We're actually not in control of anything. You know, it's like they say, if it's free, you're the product, right? And so the Web3 world gives people control back, right? And it really puts that back into your hands. So let's say you're an artist now. You have Web3 tools like, you know, Discord's like Web 2.5 really, right? But you can build communities for your art. And you can use your art as not only an asset to sell, but also a marketing device so that you can engage people to stay within your ecosystems, which is what like Web 2 kind of always sold us, but they were too centralized for it to ever be a reality. You talk shit on the president, and next thing you know, your Instagram stories, you know, went from 2,000 viewers to 1,200 viewers overnight.
Yep.
So
I notice whenever I post anything,
power.
I notice whenever I post anything that's like cannabis related on my stories, like the next day, if I post something that's not cannabis related, it's like a quarter of the people see it because Instagram just pushes you down.
Yeah, I mean,
so annoying.
That's all algorithmic, right? I mean, it's how it's designed to be, right? So, I mean, part of its algorithm is siloing everything off. These are, you know, the fashion people, and then they rank the influencers on the fashion. And this is music people. This is this vertical, that vertical. Cannabis is like another vertical. It's kind of crazy. It's like become this other vertical, but then it's the only one that they'll like keep taking us down and keep, you know, we just stay vulnerable in those situations. And like I said, Web3 tools are about taking away those vulnerabilities by giving ownership to things.
So in that sense, do you feel as though Web3 is a tool for large commercial entities to leverage the industry further, or do you think that it's a tool for smaller, more traditional-minded entities to claw back space in the industry?
Well, just look to history, right? Look at Web 2 and what happened there. There's a big boom and bust at the beginning, the dot-com, you know, burst, and then it turns into social media. And what's social media? It's really just, it's like a 10-year long like behavior modification experiment. I think that 10 years ago, it was crazy to think about hiring somebody as a full-time position to run your Instagram. And I think now, if you don't have 2 or 3 of those, if you're a large-scale business, you're losing, right? It's going to be the same thing. I think that in 2, 3, 5 years time, everybody's going to have an NFT person. Everybody's going to have, you know, every company, right, is going to have like their NFT guy or team or whatever. I think that I actually think that most marketing teams are going to adopt Web3 because that's really all it is. But it's going to be like, oh, well, this is like kind of separate, and then it'll like absorb into marketing, which is really what it is. I think a brand doesn't exist until it has, in the future, a DAO and an NFT attached to it.
What is a DAO?
So a DAO is a decentralized autonomous organization. So think of it this way. It's just ways to pool money together to achieve an action, right? So let's say it's like, think of crowdfunding, right? You want to open a pizza shop. You can start Pizza Shop DAO, get people to invest in you. You say, hey, this is what I'm going to do with the funds. So instead of getting an investor, you can get the community to invest in it. Hey, guess what? I'm going to give you an NFT that's going to represent that you know, gave in, and that NFT gets you 1 slice every week, and, you know, for free or whatever. Or every time you come in, you get 2 slices or whatever. Like those are DAOs, right? They're just crowdfunding things. So for us, like, we have a DAO that we're launching right now. It's called Terp DAO, and it's very simple. Terp DAO's mission is to help in real life, IRL, cannabis brands and just integrate them into using Web3 tools. That it's simple as that. We want to use it to fund the tools that those brands can use. Let's say a brand wants to do an NFT project and they don't have like the funding, or maybe they don't have the resources in terms of like the developers or the artists or this, that. They don't have the community. We're building that Web3 cannabis community full of people who have different skills in Web3. So that's just a way of saying like, hey, this is a community that's going to fund itself to help push its agenda forward. Really, we like think of it this way: like we're building these tools to achieve network effects, to achieve high adoption rates. We need something to support the projects and the brands that are going to utilize it. So I thought, why don't we just build something that people can make money on by helping fund? So DAOs are, think of it like they could be used in many different ways, right? So you could run a DAO that literally is like people putting in money that could go towards efforts of, like, let's say it's conservation efforts, cleaning up beaches or something, right? And it's like, we're going to use this money and that money's going to go to this. You're not going to get a return on it. Some of it, it's like they use it as like an S&P 500, kind of just like hey, I know that I'm going to get 3% return every year on my money. I'm going to put money in here and that. You can run a DAO any of a number of different ways. For us and what we're doing, it's all community driven. So there's what's called governance voting. However much you've put in is how much voting power you have. You want to see certain projects come in and get funded, you have the ability to do so. You have the ability to every week or every quarter, you can suggest this and everybody votes on it in this certain period of time. And all of those actions can be voted on by the community on how the community wants to handle it. It's all community driven. So it's actually not a security, because it's just a community of people who've pulled their money together and said, we want to use our money for this. And so we have one that is simply for integrating cannabis brands into Web3, because I believe that the bad actors of society, quote unquote, are always the early adopters of technology. I like to say that, when you think about, those of us like our age, right? When we saw people with cell phones or beepers in movies or TV shows, they were the bad actors. They were the drug dealers. They were the criminal. The reason why they did that was because they were on the new thing that the police weren't monitoring yet. We have always, in cannabis, we've always been maverick. It's not these corporate people that have been coming in. It got to this point by mavericks who went against the grain, who went where the police weren't, who did what other people weren't. I'm telling you, weed has come up so many solutions for the real world that I believe that in our Web3 tools, we'll find real world solutions that will start with cannabis that'll apply and multiply out there. I truly believe that'll happen because we're those early adopters. We've always have been. We always will be.
That's awesome. I think a lot of people maybe shy away from 3.0 and just say, I've got to focus on, what I'm doing right now. And they might be doing themselves a disservice, not getting ahead of it, myself included.
Everybody likes to say we're early, and that's true in a sense, but I like to say you're right on time, because that is really the truth. 3 years ago was too early, right? 3 years ago was too early. But now with the rate of adoption and where we're actually on an adoption curve to achieve network effects. What we now need is more verticals to adopt themselves into the system so that it keeps the steady growth, so then it becomes a self-sustaining network. That happens through these types of efforts. So, 800 Pounds Mantra. We've actually built really great partnerships with these Web3 entities. So we're working with Chronic Chain, which is a blockchain built on the Cosmos ecosystem. And for people that understand anything about like Ethereum, is that there's a lot of gas fees, right? To mint something could cost you $10, it could cost you $80. To transfer something, it could cost $10 or $80 or $130, depending on what second literally you clicked the button. It's difficult to navigate that as a business, right? Whereas in the Cosmos ecosystem, we're talking about fractions of cents on transactions, fractions of cents on minting and those sorts of things for like NFTs. And minting just means you pay for something that you don't see, and then once you've bought it, then it's revealed to you. And mints are usually a limited quantity. Let's say there's 100 NFTs, 100, and you can only mint 2 at a time. So that means 50 people, go in and mint the NFT. They don't know what it's going to be. Like, they know the project, right? Because they've seen the hype of the project, but they don't know what character or what land or what X, Y, or Z they're going to get. And they'll like to leverage and buy like 2 or whatever, or if they can buy 5, they'll buy 5 or 10, and then sell the ones they don't like, keep the ones that they like, and that's how these systems sort of go. So we can do it in a frictionless sort of system, and frictionless meaning having these large gas fees, these super high gas fees, and that's very exciting. So we've built our partners have built a blockchain called Chronic Chain. We have our token, which is called the Chronic Token, the CHT. And then we're starting the DAO to help fund more projects that will be built. So there's the blockchain, and then you build the applications on top of the blockchain. And we have applications that we're building. One of them is an NFT platform for it's our first version of it is called Glassflow, which is for glassblowers. And that is, we could authenticate your current and future pieces with NFTs that go with the sales. You can make the sale of the NFT, and then that represents the physical sale, and then you could, ship out the rig that way. I mean, there's many different ways you can do it, but we're just saying, hey, here's how you use NFTs, right? And then you can use those NFTs. And for people that don't know, NFTs is a non-fungible token. It's or more simply, it's a digital asset that sits in your wallet that when you own that wallet, you own. And you can trade upon that digital asset. And that digital asset could be a picture of a monkey. It could be X and Y coordinates on a blockchain that represent like your acre or your house or your land, right, within a future metaverse. It could just simply be you like a photograph from a photographer, and it's that photograph. It's a digital asset that can be sold, and those digital assets, I think, are the greatest marketing play of all time, which is why cannabis brands are all going to use them. There's some people that already are. Real Deal Resin's already in that world. Terp Army is already in that world, releasing NFTs. There are different glass blowers and whatnot that are setting up their own things. Some of them are going to work with us off on Glassflow because they see what we're trying to build. But at the end of the day, it's all just tools, just Web3 tools that, like Pyramid Pipeline, are open source. They're there for the community to use. We're not trying to build the fucking empire. We want us all to build the empire together and all be have our tokens that represents our ownership of it. We own it together. We build it together. If you like, if there's something that we build and you guys don't like it and you're not using it, we're going to, as a community, decide to not do it because we're not sitting in the centralized position. People want, and this is part of what I'm people are, like I said, they're kind of burnt out on social media. People are also burnt out on products that they live in. I mean, literally fucking live in, and they have no say whatsoever. I think people want to say. People want to come. Somebody has a good idea or thinks they have a good idea, bring it forward. We as a community will vote on it. If it's a dumb idea, the community will tell you in its own way by not voting on it that it's a stupid idea. If it truly is a brilliant idea, the community will see it and say, yes, we want that. Let's put our effort and energy into building that. And that's what it's going to be. That's the universe that we're really going to be in, because here's the reality. Smart contracts and tools that are going to be built off of smart contracts are going to be that automation that everybody's been fearing for 30 years that's going to take away all our jobs. That's actually like a reality with these types of tools. But I don't view that as a bad thing. I actually think it's a good thing. I think we're all creative individuals. Even those of us who think that we're not, we are. We're a creative species. We've built all of this with our fucking imaginations. I think that when we take out some of the remedial tasks that we put people on to do for us, that and they literally can't live, we can live in a better world. We can live in a creator economy. I really do believe that. I think that automation could very well bring forth the ability for people to use these tools to own their fucking intellectual property and to sell it and market upon it and create universes. I think we're all going to live in many different metaverses. I think we're going to have these conversations with like VR headsets, like in metaverses, and it's what it's going to be, you know? And so I think, like I said, people are kind of sick of the noise of social media, and they kind of want to live in like more communities because, you know, we're really only equipped, evolutionarily speaking, to understand about 150 entities, to really care about 150 entities. So like it used to be people, right? Like we could understand about upwards of 150 people before it gets too blown out and the tribe is too big for us to really manage our relationships with everybody. I think that, you know, that's kind of happening, but instead of it being people, I think it's going to be entities. Like there's only so many fucking brands and influencers and things that we can interact with. And I think for influencers to win, they're going to have to create full ecosystems that are going to keep people in. And so I think that like we're going to live in a smaller amount of like universes. And so I'm bullish on doing what we're doing Web3 because we're just sitting here going like, bro, we're about the cannabis culture, and how do we push that forward into that world that we're going into? And how do we do it together, open as a community? And I believe that our community is going to turn this into something that I never could imagine.
That's awesome, man. I'm stoked.
I agree.
If you're going in, you know, looking to just promote the community, I think that, you know, that's a recipe for success. So
I don't want to promote the community. I want to empower the community. I want to empower every brand out there. I want to empower every person that hops into the DM of Terp Hova or 800 Pounds Mantra or Pyramid Pipeline and asks, how do I get in? What do I do? How do I invest? How do I this? A million fucking questions. I think this solves all of it because it's community. You're going to have people that are going to invest. You're going to have people that are going to build. You're going to have brands that are going to come in that need to use it. And there's going to be people there that are going to help usher them in. And I think that that's what's going to happen. We'll build it. We'll build the network of it. and we'll just be fucking weed. We'll just want any brand. I want to build the tools to the point where any brand that wants to do it just goes, well, obviously we're going over, because that's where weed is.
Yeah.
And that's what I want. And I think we do that by being community first, culture first, like forward always. And if we just keep that with our North Star, I really do believe that the community itself is going to fucking make something rad. And I just want to be a part of it. I don't want to sit as the lord of it. I want no more power of it than anybody else, really, like at the end of the day, as we get more decentralized. But yeah, I mean, that's kind of the goal, man, is to just empower people, not to just promote.
That's awesome, man. Kevin, I appreciate you coming on and talking about what you're doing. And
Yeah, that was really cool.
That's very cool, man. So what's the best way for people to get a hold of you?
I mean, listen, I'm Kevin Lives Life, as it says here on the bottom. I'm that on everything. So you can hit me up on there. 800poundsmantra.com, pyramidpipeline.com. Also, 800 Pounds Mantra and Pyramid Pipeline, they each have their own Instagrams. Please come over there. Check out our Discord. If you hop onto my page or the 800 page or Terpova's page, any of them, they have a link tree. You can hit all of it. We got Twitters. We got all of it. We're just trying to engage with everybody where they are. And we really, ultimately, I think I want to filter everybody to the Discord, because that's where we can really have the conversation, really build a community until we have a better place to build that community later. But for now, it is ultimately where we want to go. But come check us out on all that, man. Check us out. We're really stoked to just work with anybody. And honestly, like, if you got a dream and you want to do something, like, hit me up. Like, let's go. Like I'm here to listen to good ideas. Like, I'm here to empower people to do good stuff. And that's like what we do.
I love that.
Awesome, brother.
Thanks so much, Kevin.
Thank you guys so much for having me on. Oh, and shout out to my boys at Rosin Heads. I had to wear, for my Canadian people. I love all you Canadian people. I gotta come up. My family's from up there. I got friends up there.
You gotta come, man.
Shout out to Bubble Man. Shout out to all you guys. So love Canada, and thank you guys for having me on, man. It's a lot of fun, and I hope to have you guys on my podcast. That's going to be dropping pretty soon.
Absolutely,
cool, man. Yeah. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kevin.
Cheers.